Okay, it's hopefully you've all had a chance to go and grab a brew and take a little comfort break. In the next hour, I hope you don't mind. We're going to be a little self-indulgent, and for the team here, we're going to discuss all things TeamKinetic. So, for those of you that are not currently customers, we hope you can see how useful and powerful some of these digital tools that we're developing are, and how they could be useful in your work, and have you have a think about how you might be able to use some of these things, if not from us, from other providers that you may have. And for those that are customers, we hope that what you see in this next hour will be quite exciting and give you a sense of what's coming next in our digital volunteer journey. At this point, I'd like to welcome my two esteemed colleagues and my two fellow founders onto the call. We've got Dr. Rolf Herbert and Stephen Hall. We're going to be talking about what's moving and shaking at TeamKinetic. And it's particularly interesting as this year we've turned 16 years old. And like most 16-year-olds, I'd like to think we're starting to move from that moody teenager part of our lives to, almost fully formed adults. There's still a little bit of rebel in there. There's still, still a little bit going on. And to celebrate coming of age, so to speak, over the last 12 months, we've been on a journey really to assess and reassess our purpose and our mission and see how that impacts our approach to the sector. Because the sector we're looking at now is very, very different to the sector that we joined some 16 years ago. That journey's involved us talking to our customers, and some of the people on the call will know they've had those conversations with us. We've been examining the broader trends around technology and technology adoption and technology costs. And we've been discussing with our various trusted partners and friends to try and get their thoughts on what the future needs to look like if volunteering is going to recover from this decline we've seen since the pandemic. And we found, unsurprisingly, that the sector faces some pretty significant challenges. These include a drop in charitable donations, a much higher level of competition for funding, for grant funding, a drop overall, as has been alluded to in the previous call and the previous session, in overall volunteer numbers. And if you take that against the backdrop of an increased demand for services, increased customer expectation around those services, and increased customer expectation, if you're thinking about volunteers in the customer sense, around their experience, with these new technologies we're looking at, there's some amazing opportunities to do good with them. We're looking at how AI could potentially be leveraged for positive reasons rather than, the end of humanity. What's the opposite example? To the opposite of Terminator. Where can we use that so we don't end up in that situation? And how these technologies become much more cost effective and available. We're seeing a really large increase in the number of young people volunteering. And the evidence would suggest that this next generation of socially engaged young people is far more inclusive and far more diverse than the predecessors. So it's not all doom and gloom, but that's not to say there's still not a lot of hard work to get done. So it's in that context that we wanted to explore what TeamKinetic needs to do to remain relevant in a market that's much more competitive than it was 16 years ago, and with volunteers that have an awful lot more choice in front of them than maybe they did 16 years ago. In the words of Dr. Seuss, my favorite philosopher, we asked ourselves a very important question. What makes us who we are, and why are we the best at being us? Okay, and I guess we revisited our core values that have remained pretty unchanged over the last 16 years. We still and always will be a volunteer-centric company. We love technology, and we want to allow all our customers to leverage these amazing, powerful technologies for good in an easy-to-access way. We want to build really easy-to-use apps that actually make the act of volunteering easier to do. We'll never charge based on the number of volunteers that you have in your system with us. So that has been our core values for the last 16 years. And they've served us quite well, we think, and we've sort of stuck to them quite religiously. But what we've learned from our partners and our stakeholders, what they've told us, is the level of economic challenge that the sector faces right now is unprecedented. And the challenge to achieve greater scale and do more with increasingly limited sets of resources is almost becoming existential for some of them. So we had to have a bit of a rethink about what we thought were the most important parts of our mission. And we adjusted those core beliefs. They're still there. We adjusted those core beliefs around this idea of affordability, this willingness and this desire to reinvest into the sector, and this desire to offer leadership when it comes to digital and digital adoption. So what's that actually meant? Well, what it actually meant is now all our work, all our effort goes into building tools that are both affordable and accessible to all organizations of all sizes. As we know, our customers are being asked to do more with less. We realize at TeamKinetic that we've got to shoulder some of that burden. So we've really worked on looking at our offer, looking at the value we offer, and making sure that we are providing as much as possible for as little cost as possible. Secondly, have the next slide, that'd be great. We've taken a sort of strategic approach, and we're really committed to making sure that the profits that we're generating, where we can, we're reinvesting back into the infrastructure of the sector. Ruth's been so kind at the start of the start of today to talk about the AVM, but they're not the only organisation we support. And on the screen there, you can see some of the other people that we've partnered with and worked with over the last few months and years. We think that supporting the sector to become more professional and to build those strongest communities of practice are absolutely essential in helping volunteer managers achieve what they want to achieve. And then finally, we really have seen something of a lack of leadership across technology in the sector for the last few years. And we want to try and help fill that void in that digital arena. So if it's open data, if it's open source software, if it's digital ID verification and passporting, if it's AI and ChatGPT, we want to become a trusted voice whose domain knowledge on those various products and services can provide a framework for the future development for the sector that's not just good for us as TeamKinetic and not just good for technology providers, but it's good for the volunteers, it's good for you guys managing volunteers, it's good for your organizations that you guys represent. So I guess it's really, that all sounds great, but what does that actually mean and how are we going to go about doing some of this stuff? Well, we've got a new mission, so we want to signal that new mission with a new mission statement, and that we started here with a volunteer management system you'll love and can afford, built to make volunteering easier. So that's where that's our mantra, that's where we go to, and the things we're trying to do, if they don't in some way impact that mission statement, we don't do them. To help us achieve that mission, we've redefined our brand. And some of you may have noticed some of these things over the last few months start to appear in the product and appear on our website. We wanted the TK brand to retain its concept of teamwork and dynamism, but we wanted to make it softer. We wanted to make it more friendly, more welcoming. So that it speaks to our deeply held commitment to community that we believe is at the heart of all our work and all your work. Most importantly, we wanted people to understand that there's quality software out there for the volunteers that's affordable and suits every type of organization. And when it comes to affordability, we've been looking at adding value every step of the product's life cycle, be that the training, the implementation, the third-party partnerships we offer. It's not just about being cost effective, it's about being high value as well. And each aspect of that's been redesigned to make sure that we're offering value at every single stage of the implementation, all the way through to the deployment of the product and the ongoing use. A big part of that, though, has involved us redeveloping our different versions of the product to be more affordable and more accessible for organizations. That means that you can grow and the product use can grow with you. So we've got more options, enabling organizations to find the right solution at the right cost for what works for them. Starting at Community, which will be free, going all the way up to our enterprise version at the top of the page there. And we started to roll out this new look and feel that you can see on the screen here across our various business areas. And in 2025, this will culminate in our most extensive interface update that we've done for many, many years. But more on that we roll in a little bit. And when it comes to the reinvestment aspect, 2024 saw us launch our peer-to-peer chat channels in our product, so customers can speak to each other, share information, share experience, share documents. This event and our masterclass program has gone from strength to strength this year, with this year being the highest number of people that have ever attended. And 2025 is going to see us launch our user group service, where we'll bring groups of customers together that share certain aspects. So it might be volunteer centres, it might be events organisations. There's a number of key user types that we're going to look at, and we're going to bring groups of customers together so we can build the next generation of products for those guys and really get into knowing and understanding what their challenges are, but also to try and really develop those strong networks of practitioners so they can share best practice and they can support each other with knowledge and experience. When it comes to reinvesting our profits, well, we're not just reinvesting our profits, we also offer technical support and our experience to make sure that we're supporting the organisations we identified. And at the end of the session, we will give a list of all the organisations that we do support. And if any of them you weren't aware of before, please do get in touch, because these organisations provide that really strong link into that wider network. And if we are really about building that community of volunteer managers and developing that voice, the AVM plays a great part, but there is other organisations that we want to work and support with to really start to build a super strong presence and leadership for the sector. So the big thing the big announcement of today from my side of things is going to be our digital volunteer toolkit that we've written in partnership with Gethin Williams and the AVM. We've taken our 16 years of experience. We've spoken to lots and lots and lots of sector experts, and we've spoken to lots of sector practitioners. And we've taken all that and pulled it into our digital volunteer toolkit. And it's your first opportunity this afternoon to see that. So the 3:15 session with Gethin is definitely a must-see. It's 16 years in the making and a year in the writing. So hopefully that's going to help take you guys as volunteer managers on a journey. Those of you that maybe haven't gone very far on that digital journey, it will give you guidance on how to start that. Those of you that are about to embark on that, those of you that are already on that journey, you will have lots and lots of interesting advice on how to make that journey as easy as possible. And for those of you that have already gone down that journey, no matter which product you're using, there'll be advice in there on how to optimize the use of technology to make sure that your volunteers are benefiting as much as possible from the technology that's out there. That's the idea of the digital toolkit, and we're going to hope it's going to take you on the next 10 years in your personal development with tech in volunteering. All of this has been underpinned by our strategic work in the background with a range of partners. These include the work we're doing with Tempo Time Credits and the work we're doing with First Advantage and CDD Safeguarding. These guys, we think, provide best in class services for volunteer rewards and for DBS check-in as two of the examples. These are services that we think will make your life as volunteer managers easier if they're embedded into your volunteer platform, and we'll continue to look at those strategic partnerships and look for those best-in-class products to integrate them into Kinetic to make managing volunteers that little bit easier and take away some of that bureaucracy where we can. Rolf and Steve are going to take you on a tour of all these changes and all these new additions. Really, my job today was to set the scene about where we want to go over the next few years, how we want to see the sector change, and how we want to be part of that change. I'm going to pass over now to Steve, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the features that are in the system that people may be aware of, but may not be using to their absolute maximum value. So, Steve, if I can pass over to you.
Hi, Chris. Do you want me to take control of the slides, or
Alex is running the slides for us at the minute, so I'm sure she can carry on for you.
Right, okay, no problem. Hi, everyone. My talk is a short talk. We're just talking about really ways to improve the insight into your volunteer program. I'm going to start with, just flick over to the next slide for us, Alex. Okay, so first question. These are basically common things that I see when I'm talking to people and we're looking at reports and stuff. And I give you a bit of background into this first slide. So I used to work with the NHS in a previous life. As a consultant, I used to go around to do a lot with reports, and you can imagine there's a lot of reporting going on in the NHS for good reason. Now, when I used to analyze a lot of these reports, I have to create a lot of these reports. You'd say, okay, who's requesting the report, and then we trace it up and say, okay, the so-and-so person's asking for it. Why are they asking for it? Oh, because the board want to know. Okay, you go up to the board, so why the board asking for it? And sometimes there's a good reason, most of the time, but sometimes, I'd say 20% of the time, I trace it back, and it would be it was a nice to know. So people would be capturing information and reporting on stuff that would thousands of people putting in data and capturing information, and then it'd land on someone's desk, and there would never be any action from it. It'd only just be a nice to know. Oh, it's interesting. So that's one of the flags I would ask yourself. If we're capturing stuff that's just interesting, but there's no potential action at the end of it, then you need to be kind of ask yourself some serious questions about, whether that's necessary to do that. But most of the time, it falls into these two other categories, which is a potential action or requested by management. If it's for yourself, when you're building these reports within TeamKinetic or any other system, then always start with what's the question that I'm asking? What is it I want? I need the answer for. And then you work on, okay, how do I answer this question? Then you work your way back through the system and find out the metrics. So for example, I want to know what volunteers are typing into the search bar, which is one of the reports in TeamKinetic some of you'll be aware of if you use it. So you can search and it'll show you a pie chart, I think it is, of all the different search words that people are typing into the search bar. And you say, well, okay, that's nice. Why? And it's that why. You need, with all this stuff, it's really important that you always ask yourself, why am I asking for that? Oh, I'm asking that because hopefully it's not just interesting to know, because there's an actual potential action at the end of it. So I'm asking for the search bar, what people are typing into the search bar, because I want to make sure that I'm offering the right type of opportunities. Or maybe the right type of opportunities already exist on my system, but I need to tag them with the search words, because I know that I know what people are typing in, but when they type in those words, it's not bringing up the opportunities that I'd like it to bring up, because the word they're typing in doesn't appear within the title, or it's not tagged appropriately with the activity tags. So yeah, really kind of follow that through. What's the question I'm asking, and then work backwards from there. Even before what the question I'm asking, I suppose, is why am I asking it? I suppose it is before that. We're going to look at the final one, which is when a report is requested by management, like board level reports. So your hands are kind of tied with these, to be honest with you. It tends to be a case of, if a report has been created for a number of years before, and then you change over and you say, oh, I've started using this fantastic system called TeamKinetic, then you generally have to kind of compile the same type of report at the very minimum, so they can compare metrics of the previous year. So your hands can be tied. If it is a new report for board level, and you've gone from nothing, then you have a little bit of flexibility there. And I always think it's good to kind of speak to the board members, or speak to the management team who are requesting it, and find out, make sure that they understand why they're asking that question. And a lot of the time there's a very good answer for it, but sometimes there's not. So just make sure that they are asking the right questions, and then you say, okay, because it might be a case of, well, that's probably not the right question to ask, or there's a better way of answering that question. I've got this other data available for you, which might give you a better insight into the question that you fundamentally are asking. Yeah, Alex, can you move to the next slide for us? So I'm going to look at a particular example, which is Manchester City Council, which was our first customer, actually, going back 16 years. And they had initial pain where basically the City Council wanted to create these reports for board level, and they had been created before, but the hands were kind of tied in this one in regards to what metrics and what data they had to produce. But they had additional pain. They had geographic wards around Manchester, and all the city councils you all work the same, I'm sure. You have these specific wards that you have to report on, certainly larger cities. Now, obviously, wards it's not something that, my understanding of a ward, if you said Ardwick, for example, which is an area in Manchester, is not going to be the same as the person who working for Manchester City Council's understanding of what that ward is. So it's something which is very specific to the organisation, to Manchester City Council. So we have to kind of geographically ring fence those areas within the system, so we can actually report on them. Because it's not something like, if you said how many volunteers from Manchester, well, I know what Manchester is. More importantly, Google knows what Manchester is, and so does the City Council. So you can answer that question. When it comes to customer areas that's only specific to your organisation, you can still do that within TeamKinetic, and that's exactly what Manchester City Council did. It basically uses postcodes, areas with postcodes, and then you can define those areas and report on them at the other end. So one of the issues was defining those wards. This is in the proposition here. And also, obviously, make sure that we create the same metrics that can be measured. So things like ethnicities, genders, all that kind of stuff. Well, they have to be the same as what was being measured before, obviously. So you can do a good comparison, a real-time comparison. So on to the next slide. Okay, I tell you what, I tell you what you want, what you really, really want, my data to make sense. God, I've thought that a few times. Next slide, please, Alex. So those of you use the system, there is loads of reports within the system. Okay, we've got your kind of basic kind of analytical kind of stats across the top, and you can do them by date range and all this, that, and the other. We've got your web analytics. Those who know web analytics is how many people are hitting the site. We've got your KPIs on your volunteers, age, ethnicity, all that kind of stuff. And then we've even got geographical reports, maps where you can see exactly where the volunteers come from and where opportunities are and how many volunteers are around those opportunities, etc. And you can do that at the system level. You can do that at the opportunity level, or even the event level. You can do it as well. So there's a huge amount of reports available within the system without you doing anything at all. But sometimes, especially when it comes to when you're trying to match an existing report and you've got things like wards, okay, which are very specific to that organization, then you'll need to create custom reports. Now, I don't know if most of you who are TeamKinetic users will be aware of this, but if you're not, then the facility is there to request custom reports. They are chargeable, but it's not kind of break the bank stuff. But if you go on to the next slide for Alex. So we're talking about Manchester City Council wanted this report for their board. They use a combination of those inbuilt reports that we just looked at there, but also they had to request custom reports because of the ward areas. Obviously, we don't have any standard reports which report on wards which are specific to Manchester. That doesn't make any sense. So they create these custom reports. So using a combination of the two, they could go on to actually compile that and put into some kind of meaningful words for the actual report, meaningful paragraphs for the actual report. And when it comes to custom reports, we literally can create custom reports for anything. Okay, as long as we're holding the data in the system, then we can. The development team are very good at kind of dragging that information out and putting it into a format that suits you. So we've done that for Manchester City Council, and this is just a small snippet of their custom reports. They've actually got a lot more than this. I think they've got about 20 or something like that in different areas, and obviously it's a big local authority. So using a combination of those standard reports in the system and these custom reports, they use that to create their quarterly reports for the board, which if you go on to the next slide for me. Okay, thanks. So that's the quarterly reports for the board. Now, so from here, they're basically taking that data that I've gathered and then they put it into a meaningful paragraph, obviously, which makes sense to the board. If you want to view that particular report, feel free. The link's down the bottom there. Yeah, the reports, when we create these custom reports, just if you are interested in requesting a custom report, it is something which pay a one-off fee. That's it. You have its real-time information, which is generated. So at any point, any day, any minute, you can go on there and click on it, and it'll be up to date as of that moment in time in terms of looking at the data that's within your system. Yeah, so using that using that combination of the standard reports and the custom reports, they created this particular report. And the final slide, I just want to talk about something which wasn't used for that particular report, but it's something which has been updated recently on our system, and it's really powerful. Now, I'm not sure that some of our users understand exactly how powerful it can be, and it's search filters. So we have search filters on volunteer pages, opportunity pages, and provider pages. The volunteer pages is one we're looking at here, and it can answer a lot of your questions. Okay. No cost involved. It's all built into the system, the search filters. So I think it's what the takeaway I'd like you to do from here is really think about what the fundamental questions are that you want to ask about your volunteer program, and then think about, well, how am I going to get that out of the system? Start in that particular order, and get yourself familiar with those search filters. Like you say, who may be interested? The top filter bar there shows the full array, so you can select your filter, whatever the area is that you're interested in, whether it's the number of opportunities they've been on, type of opportunities, the last time they logged in, what area they're from, what city they're from, everything's on there, and you can select them in a combination to come up with to answer that particular question for you. Key thing is once you've created it, so for example, the top question is who may be interested in volunteering to do with parks and green spaces. Well, on the Manchester City Council system, they've got a category called parks and green spaces. So they can say, show me all volunteers who have joined any opportunity within that category. Okay, so it's answering that particular question for you. The great thing, addition to the filtering, is the ability to save it. So you can actually save these filters, and you see it in the top right there. You can save these filters and name them, and actually name them the actual question that it's asking. You know, so all right, I've got a question. So basically, you could end up with a list. I've seen it in a couple of systems now, a list of half a dozen questions, kind of key questions that you want to know. You know, who stopped using the system? Okay, click on it. That's it. You've got a list there. People who haven't logged in for 6 months. Okay, I'm going to send an email. I'm going to re-engage with them and try and get them back on board. So we need to really think about, first of all, what questions you'd like the system to answer, and then use those filters and those reports to try and answer those particular questions. And that's it from me. Any questions? No?
There's nothing in the chat at the minute, but if people do have any questions they want to ask about any aspect of the stuff we talk about, or anything like that, then please do let us know. We'll go over to Rolf, who's going to tell you about the new stuff that's about to land. Rolf, over to you.
Hello, how's everyone going? Thanks for turning up today. We appreciate everyone's time. Yeah, I'm going to talk today about some things that we are building. Some of these things are already being tested, and some we've just started with. But these are the key aspects of the app that are going to change in the next major update. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is something we've named flows. We've got the situation now where we have a lot of different ways of restricting an opportunity, defining an opportunity. We have our existing roles set up. You can mark an opportunity as requiring an apply process. There's various restrictions around age, where they've got a background check, where they've been inducted. And these are all at present sort of independent things, and you can select them independently or group them together. But it's become quite complex and fragmented because they've been introduced at different times as our users' needs have changed over time. So part of what this, the main driver for this change to a flow system is so we can pull all those things together into one process. And we can also apply that sort of flow process to other points in the application. So initially, what we're going to try and do is create flows that are editable and customizable by the users for joining an opportunity, and also in the sort of onboarding post-registration period. So if anyone on any of our existing customers have used the role system already, we're going to base this on the way that works, partly to keep it familiar, so there's not a whole bunch of new stuff to learn, and partly because it lends itself well to that, and we've already built some of it, so we can save some time there. So the way it'll work is at the time of creation of an opportunity, or before you create the opportunity, you can create these flows. So they will have a simple sort of information around name, description for the flow, so you know what they are later on when you need to reference them. They'll contain all the various restrictions for the opportunity, whether they have to be a certain age, whether they need to be background checked, all these sort of yes/no type questions for the volunteer, and then a bunch of tasks or steps which will be created in the same ways you do now for the role process. Give them the name, few notes, can the volunteer complete them? But we're going to increase the types of steps you can add. So as well as the normal stuff, we'll also have things for uploading a file, downloading a file. We're going to try and get some scheduled things in there, like sending emails. So if they've done this part of the flow, or it's so many days since the start of the application, send this email to them. That sort of scheduling stuff in there. And this will be applied to the opportunity. So whenever you have any restrictions or anything that the person has to do before joining the opportunity, all those opportunities will become an apply process. So we'll get rid of the roles, get rid of the separate apply process, and get rid of the separate restrictions process. And they'll all be bundled into this one flow. And that can be as complicated or as long or short as required. So it may be that it's just a simple restriction. And as soon as they apply, if the restrictions are all met, then they can go through that application process immediately without any input from the admin. Whereas if there's these steps to do, then there'll be a delay before that process gets done. It'll be similar for the post registration process, except there won't be that restriction idea. It'll just be the series of steps, because obviously they won't have any of those restrictions in place. But you could make achieving those restrictions as part of that flow, like do the background check, make sure they've had their training materials, have they downloaded the training materials, these sorts of things. Because it's a flow, we'll be able to track that flow. So you'll be able to look at volunteers who are be able to choose one of the flows, whatever that is, whatever you call it, bring up details about that flow, and also bring up the details about the people on that flow. And you'll get a quick visual sort of clue as to how far along in the process those people are in that flow, what the blocks are, where you need to step in and do some work and things like that. It's also possible that we may be able to include some prompting. If it's been a certain length of time since the step's been done, or if they seem to be blocked, we may be able to automate some of those processes, and give the admins a nudge, or give the volunteers a nudge if there's tasks that they need to do. This will perform one of the major updates, one of the major components of the next update. We're only on the start of this process. We're still talking to customers, finding out what they need to do. We're still looking at the data about how roles have been used and what sort of tasks people have asked in the roles to form this. So if you do have any ideas or any personal experience of these sorts of flow systems, please get in touch and let us know as we start to formulate how this will work. It is going to be a big thing, so the next development cycle will probably be slowed down quite a lot. We'll still have some small intermediate releases, but this big release is going to take us a little while, so it might be 6 months before some of this stuff surfaces. The next one. The next thing is all around GDPR and data retention and things like that. So some of you may or may not be aware, we already do have an automated delete process. So if someone isn't active, which is defined as having logged in or been put on or joined a session within the period you select, they get marked as ready for deletion. They get sent an email 48 hours before the deletion event happens to let them know that they're in danger of being deleted, and if they log in, it'll reset the process. If they don't, then they get removed. But at present, you don't have any options about the data that's retained. So the only thing that gets retained right now is the hours. They get anonymized and they just get put on a big heap along with all your other deleted hours that you can see in the reports. But we know that people need to retain data and need to retain specific data depending on their particular case and their volunteers and the types of opportunities that volunteers do. So what we're going to do in the future is enable you to define that date the same when people should be auto-deleted, but in addition to define a data retention level. So at the minute we've settled on 4 levels. The first one is the default, which is just the hours that we've already talked about. The second one will be hours and some profile information. What that will entail is still up for discussion again, if you've got any ideas about that. So things like name, contact details, phone number, email address, when they registered, those sorts of details. The next level will be that plus their opportunity history, which opportunities they were on, what sessions they attended. And the highest level will be all of that plus our action log and potentially any emails they've been sent, any communications that we retain that we know about for that user. Then there'll be a further date field, which will be how long to retain that extra information for. So you'll have 2 dates. You'll have the date at which stuff starts getting, when volunteers start getting removed automatically. You'll have the levels of data to retain, and then another date which tells us how long you want to keep that retained data for. And then after that period, 2-4 years, whatever you've got defined in your policies, data policies, then we'll get rid of that data at the end of that period. There'll also be a screen somewhere in the app, again, we don't know where yet, where you'll be able to search for the people that have been deleted and get the information back that you've retained on that person and view it, and potentially delete it immediately at that point if it's not if it's not suitable to retain. That's the second part, which is the customized data retention. The third part is the UI interface change that Chris spoke about earlier on, which is for our volunteers. So we know it's obviously very important that the experience of the volunteers is good and it's welcoming and it looks good and they don't get put off by the front end and things like that. And it's been a while since we've upgraded the front end for the volunteers. So we know that fashions, expectations move on. People expect more and more of their applications on the web. People forget it's a website at all anymore. They expect it to work just like their spreadsheet or their word processor, even though it's online. And additionally, what happens is that as functionality and new features are added, they tend to get buried under other stuff, and you can end up with quite a noisy sort of interface because things get slotted in or moved in and maybe without a holistic view sometimes because you're just trying to get those features out. So we'll be completely refreshing the design of the volunteers dashboard, and also right now what we're doing is collecting data about how the volunteers are using their current dashboard. So which things do they go to first, which sections do they look at most, how much interaction is there in different parts, and we're trying to build a picture so that we can, as a default view, we can put what volunteers need most in front of them, so they have to move around a lot less on the screen. This is how it sort of looks right now. This is, we're just messing around at the minute, trying to form it up, but we're trying to get a bit more on the screen on the homepage and reduce the number of sections on the left, so more of the information is in the front. It currently is branded up with our new brand colors and stuff like that. The top left will have all their sort of immediate things that we know they use a lot, like updating their profile, photos, getting to their inbox and their messages, a calendar view, search, home, anything that we identify as being used a lot and they need to access wherever they are in the app will end up in this region here. And then we'll have plenty of information on the homepage for them to see straight away, along with their major sort of achievements here. We're also a bit stuck about what's called feedback. So if anyone's got any ideas about that, please do paste them in the chat. So you see we've got boost, kudos spelt badly, things like this. So if anyone's got any ideas about what to call these things, because we'd like to make more of that process for the volunteers and make them realize that the feedback, which from providers is nearly overwhelmingly positive, is a good thing, and they should be proud of those interactions they get from the provider. The last thing I'm going to talk about is how we integrate with other applications. So some of this can be a bit technical and a bit scary, and some integrations are much harder to do than others. Some are pretty simple. But if you ever want to know what we connect to, you can always pop along to Super Admin menu, if you're an existing customer, which is the cog in the top right, and then go to setup. And one of the sections there is APIs and integrations and stuff like that. And that gives a pretty good overview of the sort of things we connect to. And you can take a look. And if you're interested in any of those things and you can't figure it out, you want more information, just open a support ticket. We're always there to talk about it. But we've got a couple of new developments coming, which are out in the wild already. They're being looked at and tested already by a couple of our braver customers. The first is something called tempo time credits. We all know how valuable volunteering is. We all love to give some rewards back to that volunteer, and sometimes it's enough just to be made to feel that we appreciate what you do. But other times you'd like to give them something actual physical, a physical reward. So Tempo Time Credits is a national program, and they go around to all the sort of various organizations and places in regions and work out rewards and offers for the volunteers, like free cinema tickets, games to matches, attractions and books and cinema tickets, all these sorts of things, which are then in a big pool that the volunteer can access by exchanging their hours for these Tempo Time Credits. There is a cost to the Tempo program. You might find that your local council is already involved in Tempo. I know that was the case in Carmarthenshire for the Carmarthenshire Volunteer Program, and they could hit on the back of the Carmarthen Council Tempo program. This is something we're trialing now, but if you are interested in that, again, get in touch with Chris, either at the meeting at the end or put a message on the chat and we'll pick them all up at the end. We'll also have some information about it in the pack, which we send out at the end of the meeting next week sometime. It's dead simple to integrate once you get over the hump at the start. So once you get over the hump of setup and sorting out your account with Tempo and getting all the crazy numbers and codes and IDs and all this sort of rubbish that computers need to talk to each other, it's pretty simple. You dictate a maximum number of hours that any volunteer can exchange in a month for Tempo credits. They can join Tempo through the TeamKinetic interface, and they can exchange their hours for vouchers through the TeamKinetic interface. And then once they come to redeem those vouchers, they have to go to Tempo. You as an admin can do most of it in TeamKinetic. You can ask for more hours. You can dictate which opportunities have hours available and all these sorts of things. So once you're going, it's pretty simple. It runs itself near enough. You just got to keep an eye on the credits to make sure you're not funding half the cinemas in your area. The second one is for background checks with First Advantage. So this is being trialed out now, but we're ready to take on other people if they're interested. Again, there is an external cost to this for each check, which I think is around the £14 mark for digital ID and the background check as well. So there's two aspects of this. Again, we have some setup to do at the start. We need to sort out account credentials and all that. But again, once you go in, super simple to do. Just go to the volunteers profile, the volunteer management page, select the sort of volunteer type, whether they need an enhanced level check, whether they need child list check, adult list check, these sorts of things which are predefined, and hit the start button. What happens then is an email goes to that volunteer asking them to go to a app on their phone, which is like a sort of Yoti type app. And within that app, they can upload their ID for their, they can scan their passport, their driving license, all that sort of stuff to get their ID checked digitally, which means you don't have to see them, you don't have to see them in person, you don't have to collect all their information, you don't have to collect their address details, all these sorts of things. It's all collected digitally. And then that goes to First Advantage and they start the background check at that point. Once the ID check is successful, the background check should take less than 24 hours. Obviously, there can be some delays and stuff. And all the changes and the updates to that process, so when their ID check is successful or failed, when they go on to the background check, the result of the background check and the date and the number of that background check, they're all fed back into the interface with an email notification. So you never have to leave TeamKinetic. You can go from digital ID to background check in 24 hours by pressing one button. So it's super quick, super easy. As I said, there are some other integrations knocking around. We still got the Do It integration, even though the big help out is finished now. You can still connect to your Do It account and publicize your opportunities on Do It. We've got the webhooks, which if we don't know, webhooks are like a one-way notification system. So when actions happen on the site, on your application, like a registration, a volunteer joining an opportunity, a new opportunity being created, it will send a special little payload of information to a web address that you specify. If you've ever used Zapier, you can integrate webhooks with Zapier, and then onwards from Zapier into any other bits of software you use. Google Documents, for instance, works with Zapier and webhooks. There's a whole array of possibilities there. So take a look at that integration page and ask any questions you've got in the support tickets. Don't ask Chris because he won't know what the answers are. That's it for the end of my little session. I'm sure people are going to have questions. I think we've got time to do some questions now because we're ahead of schedule. Just want to remind people that at the end of the day at 4, if you are still around, on the last slide, there'll be the links to the rooms and some QR codes you can scan. So I'll be in one room, Steve and Chris in another one. So if you've got any questions about integrations or new stuff, or how you can get involved in shaping how this stuff looks, then get in touch in those rooms. Thanks very much. Anybody got any questions?
We've got a couple of questions that have come through. A couple of people have moved from Know Your People to UCheck. We unfortunately don't support UCheck. Is TK available on Zapier for linking? Rolf?
We don't have a specific Zapier application in Zapier yet, although I am working on it. But yes, as I mentioned, you can integrate webhooks. So you can use the webhook. Zapier will provide you with a special URL, and you enter that into the webhook. So all our webhooks then go to Zapier, and you can define what Zapier does with them.
I think it's worth mentioning around the Tempo time credits. We've got a session running in Manchester, which Annabella's kindly put the link in for here for organisations that are in the Greater Manchester area. And we've got another one running on the 1st of October in Glasgow for organisations in the Glasgow area that might be interested in Tempo time credits, or that are in Scotland that might be interested in finding out a little bit more about Tempo. So I think, Alex, if you can dig out I'm not sure we've got the link yet for the Scotland one, but if we can dig out the link for the Scotland one as well, we'll pop it in here for anybody that is interested in finding out a little bit more about Tempo time credits. There's a question about Volunteer Scotland Disclosure Service, which is First Advantage do offer Disclosure Scotland, but they don't offer PVG currently. We're also working with Nicole from a company called CDD Safeguarding, who are another supplier of background checks. We're a Manchester-based company. They do support PVG. So that is something that is very much on our roadmap and something Rolf's working on currently. So we've got a couple of options around background check providers. There is some difference in cost as well between those two providers. I won't get into all that on this particular call. I'm just having a look here. There was maybe one or two other little questions just to make sure I've not missed anything. Keith asked a question about, can any changes and opportunities be edited, or opportunities apply? Sorry, Keith, do you want to ask your questions? I'm just trying to make sure.
Yeah, so thinking about the changes you made to some of the processing with the opportunities. Yeah. So all the existing opportunities, we're able to change those existing as a, can I select all and make those changes, or will I have to go into each individual?
Yeah, I was lying awake at night thinking about that.
I bet.
About how to change the existing opportunities. So we'll have to do some work on fishing out all the opportunities that are still live that are applying or have a role assigned. The roles I think will be quite easy to convert into the flow system because they'll be fairly similar. But we'll just have to add on to those roles the stuff around any restrictions. But yeah, we will probably, I think the plan will be to convert everyone's old opportunities that are still live into the new system, and then you can go ahead and edit them after that. So we won't ask you to do the work to convert them.
Okay, can I ask, based on, we were talking about DBSs, weren't we, and what have you, and as part of that process, one of the things all of our roles would always consider a DBS for a 16-year-old and plus. However, some roles are exempt. Some of the issues I'm having at the moment is it's more housekeeping, that on someone's personal profile it would just say DBS no, and what I'd like it to say is not required, or so, do you know what I mean, or something along those lines, rather than say they don't have a DBS, because then it's kind of, I want to show that, yeah, as a profile that we consider each role, that at this point a drop-down menu says it's not required at this time within their committed opportunities, if that makes sense.
We've got a couple of developments in the plan around those things. So the first is enabling on an opportunity, which would end up in the flow system now. Marking opportunities, you will need a criminal check, a background check rather, to do this opportunity, but you don't need one to start. So sometimes providers have their own background check process, and it'll happen later on down the line of their own processes. So we don't exclude people at the start, but with the volunteer knows they will have to undergo a background check to do it. So that might help with some of the things. We can always extend out the information that's held about a DBS if you want like a note to be put on the system around the DBS why they don't need one or why they do need one. It doesn't work very well in terms of the specific opportunities they're on, because you've only got one volunteer profile and they may be on 50 opportunities. So that connection with the opportunities is harder to handle. So you really want to have that information in the opportunity rather than against a volunteer. But yeah, if you get in touch on a support ticket with any of the extra information you'd like to store around their background check, then let us know and we can take a look at it, because it is fairly rudimentary at the minute. We always have this vision that we were going to go to the digital check, so it's never really been overdeveloped. So, I
guess the other thing to mention on that as well, and this is coming back against the work with CDD with Nicole, who I mentioned, is they have some services that allow us to potentially passport DBSs, because the DBS will belong to the individual volunteer. So there's, should we say, slightly further out on our roadmap, but certainly something we're very keen to look at, is this idea of having volunteers having their own wallet, which will contain certain digital characteristics, DBS potentially being one of them, that makes it much more transferable. So there is some longer term thinking in terms of volunteer transferability and the digital pieces we need to have in place to enable the compliance around that for you guys to be able to manage that. Steve,
the other great thing about CDD, remember which
CDD.
Well, one of the reasons we're looking at them as an alternative partner is they do like an update service. So the volunteer is automatically enrolled in an update service, but they also send out alerts to us, which we can pass on to you if there's a new check performed, or if the check details change, or if the check results change.
Yes, hi Chris. Yeah, I was just going to give a little bit of just looking at some of the questions that are coming up, a bit of clarity. So basically, this development of the flow thing has come from, you know, as we've developed over the last 16 years, we've added in kind of new features like, oh, you can apply for an opportunity rather than just join it, or you can say this opportunity requires a DBS, or all these different things, references, and this, that, and the other, and they've kind of crept in there, and they kind of got to a position where we're like, you know what, these basically need to be done in some kind of flow. They need to be in a set way. We can just put them up one after the other, and we can say, let's apply this to this opportunity. Now, the great thing about this development is, and it's going to answer a lot of your questions I know in training, certainly, is you could attach to that flow and say, okay, these things have to happen in this particular order, or maybe in any order, but they still need to be completed before the person can get onto an opportunity. Or you could say, actually, once they're on the opportunity, they have to complete the flow. So I know that's quite a common thing, and that's going to come a little bit later, but that's quite a common thing that I come up against in training. They say, let them join the opportunity, then I need them to do X, Y, and Z. You know, read this health and safety document, watch this video, get a DBS in place. And that same flow, so it can be applied either before they get on the opportunity, it can be applied after they've joined the opportunity, or it can even be applied after the registration. So when the volunteer first registers, some of you might say, I need them to do these things before they can get on any of these opportunities. And that, so you're still creating them in the same way. It's all called a flow, and you decide where it's going to be applied to. Hopefully that answers a couple of them questions.
So we are rapidly approaching lunchtime, and we're keen that you get a full lunch. Again, myself, Rolf, Steve, Alex, Barb, and Finn are going to be hanging around for anybody that wants to have a chat with us. Appreciate when we start talking about the product. Sometimes our customers have got very particular questions that they want to ask, so we're there to answer them. And we appreciate the people that aren't our customers, maybe thinking, "Oh, this one isn't relevant to us." For you guys, really, it's giving a sense of what's coming in this digital space. You may be able to take advantage of, if not with us, with one of our fellow competitors in the space. So, you know, it's really a chance to get a bit of a sense of what we want to do. This session really is hopefully gives you a sense of what we're going to be about for the next 10 years in terms of what's important to us. And hopefully you guys will be with us another 10 years when we're celebrating our 26th conference, and we can reflect back on some of this stuff and see what we actually managed to do versus what.
I'm going to try and wear the same T-shirt and keep as similar as I can to my original photo.
Please do remember, we still got our prize for the best social media post. So get posting over lunch. Let us see what you've had for your lunch. The hashtag again, TK2024, and we'll see you all back here at 1 o'clock.